What is up, you guys? This is Anthony Metro with the Anthony Metro podcast, and the big news today that I will be discussing is, of course, the Mets signing relief pitcher Dellin Betances. If you like this podcast, be sure to follow me on Spotify, radio.com, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Anthony Metro, where I post all the latest news, rumors, and highlights from the Mets and Major League Baseball. So, yesterday on December 24th, Mets fans were treated to an early Christmas gift in the form of free agent relief pitcher Dellin Betances. The Mets agreed to a one-year contract for 2020 with the former Yankee Betances, worth approximately $10.5 million. The Mets designated infielder Sam Haggerty for assignment to make room for Betances on the 40-man roster. So I know there are conflicting reports and maybe a bit of confusion about the details of Betances' salary, but allow me to explain the structure of the contract. So according to Anthony DiComo of MLB.com, Betances' base salary for 2020 is $2.2 million. In addition, Betances received a $5.3 million signing bonus. So now the deal will also include a $6 million player option for 2021, which Betances, of course, will have the right to exercise or decline. If Betances declines his option and wants to test free agency again, there is a $3 million buyout that the Mets will have to pay him. So when you add his $2.2 million base salary with his $5.3 million signing bonus and eventually his $3 million buyout, the total comes to $10.5 million guaranteed. There is also another clause in the contract that says if Betances appears in at least 50 games in 2020, he will also trigger a $1 million player option for 2022. So let's review this deal by going over some of the pros and cons regarding Betances. If you listen to my previous podcast, you know that I mentioned I preferred the Mets sign relief pitcher Will Harris instead of Betances, but that does not mean that I am opposed to this deal in any shape or form. Of course, the pros, we know he is a four-time All-Star. We know he has a fastball that can go as fast as 101 miles per hour. From 2014 to 2018, he was just fantastic. He struck out at least 100 batters in 5 consecutive seasons, and he's actually the only Major League Baseball player in the history to ever accomplish that. It's a one-year deal, and that may only affect the competitive balance tax salary by $2.5 million. So it allows the Mets to keep flexibility for this offseason, potentially go out and spend some more money, and there is also no commitment to 2021 other than an affordable $6 million option. So the cons, we know Betances missed nearly all of last season outside of one appearance. He had a shoulder impingement that kept him out most of the season. And in his one and only major league outing in 2019, he actually injured his Achilles jumping off the mound in excitement, which to me, it just sounds about the most Mets way that you could get injured. And the truth is, as I alluded to in my previous podcast, the Mets have always had awful luck when it comes to injuries. We all know that. And even the freak ones like Betances suffered with his Achilles last year. I mean, just to name a few off the top of my head, Jerry Blevins taking a comebacker off his arm and then re-injuring that same arm by falling off a curb. Many years ago, of course, Tom Glavine and Duaner Sanchez each had their own taxi accidents where they suffered injuries in the accidents. So, of course, the Mets always are prone to getting injured and sometimes in the weirdest ways. So that, of course, is a little scary to me. But the second con, and this, of course, is complete conjecture from me, but I do believe that Betances, coming from the Yankees, is going to be under the microscope to perform, both for Mets fans and the media. There is always a stigma when a player leaves the Yankees for the Mets, as if to say the Mets take the Yankees' washed-up players. And I have to believe that if Betances spends a large portion of the season injured like he did last year, or he simply doesn't live up to his past projections, that this move will be reviewed very harshly by fans and media alike. Nonetheless, as of today, December 25th, Merry Christmas, by the way, and Happy Hanukkah and all holidays to you. I think this is a great move for the Mets in 2020. People can say what they want about Betances missing time and being a former Yankee, but the bottom line is Betances was one of the best relievers in the game from 2014 to 2018. Last year, the Mets bullpen ranked 25th out of 30 teams in ERA. So addressing the bullpen was an essential part of having a successful offseason for this team. I mean, it's a low outlay for arguably the best reliever that was on the market, one who also has experience pitching and closing games out in New York. We know Betances has electric stuff, and if he is healthy and pitches to his ability, he could well be the best reliever in the Mets bullpen moving forward. So with this move, as it stands right now, if the season began tomorrow, the Mets bullpen probably would consist of Betances, Brad Brock, who was re-signed this offseason, Seth Lugo, Yuris Familia, Edwin Diaz, Justin Wilson, Robert Gesellman, and then one of Michael Wacha, Rick Porcello, or even possibly Steven Matz. I personally think we will see Wacha pitching out of the bullpen before Porcello or Matz, but it does seem that the Mets are willing to have an open competition for the 4th and 5th spots in the rotation, with the last man going into the bullpen. So at this point, the Mets have a decent group of big league relievers, but that being said, I think it would behoove the Mets to take a long look at acquiring another major league reliever. The most concerning thing to me is that pitchers in general are quite fragile, and a large percentage of the group I just mentioned experienced injuries just last year. Betances, of course, highlighted his shoulder impingement and Achilles injuries last year. Familia has had his fair share of injuries during his time with the Mets. He's usually good for at least 1 or 2 trips to the injured list. Last year, he had 2 separate ones, both for a shoulder injury. And then, of course, even Justin Wilson, while excellent with the Mets last year, he did miss 10 weeks of the season from April 19th to July 2nd, making just 1 appearance in that time while he dealt with a sore elbow. So let's take inventory of the Mets' relief pitching depth behind that projected bullpen by taking a look at the 40-man roster. First and foremost, the Mets have lost 3 pitchers from the 40-man roster this offseason. Chris Flexen and Drew Gagnon have both agreed to pitch in the Korean League in separate deals, and Chris Mazza was recently claimed off waivers by the Boston Red Sox. So that leaves us with Tyler Batchelor, who had a 6.95 ERA in 22 innings last year, Daniel Zamora, who had a 5.19 ERA in 8 2/3 innings, Corey Oswalt, who has a career 6.43 ERA in 71 big league innings, Walker Lockett, who pitched out of the rotation and in relief, and had an 8.34 ERA in 22 innings. Donnie Hart, who has bounced around the majors and is a 28-year-old but only has 89 career innings. And Steven Nogasek, who actually passed through waivers without being claimed and was reassigned to AAA last week. He had an ERA over 10 in just 7 appearances. Lastly, the Mets do have one more pitcher on their 40-man roster in Franklin Colome, who the Mets acquired in a trade with Philadelphia in 2018 that sent Asdrubal Cabrera to the Phillies. Colome underwent Tommy John surgery in October of 2018 and missed the entire 2019 season. He was the Mets' 5th overall prospect at the time of the surgery, and given the usual rehab of 12 to 18 months for Tommy John, he is expected to be ready to pitch in the 2020 season at some level in the minors. So while I recognize that these are all small sample sizes, I am concerned with the names on this list. No one of that group that I mentioned had an ERA below 5 last year or for their career, and each of them were called upon at some point last year to step up and contribute at the big league level with the dearth of injuries and underperformance that the Mets bullpen suffered last year, and truthfully, none of them were very successful. So again, pointing back to the fragility of the Mets bullpen and really any major league pitching staff for that matter, it's inevitable that one and possibly more than one of those guys are going to take trips to the injured list and at the same time, meaning the Mets would have to dip into that pitching depth, or in my opinion, lack thereof. So for those reasons, I think the Mets should consider signing another free agent reliever with a proven track record. As I mentioned in my previous podcast, I was a big fan of the Mets signing Will Harris, but I was also a fan of them adding Craig Stammen as well. I think with the signing of Betances, the Mets are out on Will Harris. I do, however, still think it would be wise for the Mets to take a long look at Stammen or fellow free agent reliever Steve Cishek. Stammen, I mentioned previously, has had a heavy workload each of the past 3 seasons, amassing 240 total innings between 2017 and 2019. Still, he's been very effective in that time, but his durability could be a concern at 35 years old. Cishek, meanwhile, the former closer for the Marlins, has quietly put together a very good career with an ERA of 2.69. Last year with the Cubs, he pitched to a 2.95 ERA. However, his whip was 1.2, and his fielding independent pitching was over 4.5, indicating he might have had some fortunate bounces or solid defense playing behind him. Still, Cishek has put together a fantastic career. His numbers over the last 3 to 4 years have been very good, and he would be a welcomed addition to the Mets bullpen. Most importantly, this adds depth by pushing Robert Gsellman and one of the starting pitchers further down the chart. We, of course, have no idea how Waka or potentially Porcello or Matz will pitch out of the bullpen and if they'll be able to adjust to that new role. And this will also keep the Mets from being forced to rely on any of the minor league pitchers from the 40-man roster that I previously mentioned. In summation, the Mets and Brodie Van Wagenen did an excellent job by landing Dellin Betances. I think the Mets have quietly put together a very strong offseason, and Betances adds to that. Though I don't think the job is done yet as far as the bullpen is concerned, and I do hope that the Mets add some more help in the form of quality major league relievers, perhaps one of the two that I mentioned in Cishek or Stammen. So what do you guys think? I want to hear your thoughts. Are you happy with the Betances signing? Do you believe the Mets are ready to go with the current bullpen they have? Or should they add one more guy like Stammen or Cishek? Let me know in the comment sections. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe to the Anthony Metro podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and subscribe to Anthony Metro on YouTube, where I will be posting news, rumors, and my opinions on all things Mets and Major League Baseball. I am Anthony Metro. Let's go Mets.